Hi, everyone, and welcome to Innovation Insider. I'm thrilled to kick off Series 3 with a conversation with Nic Blair. Nic is a serial entrepreneur and the founder of Midnight Health, a leading digital healthcare platform in Australia. He's also a former Queensland Young Entrepreneur of the Year and BRW Fast 100 finalist, with experience building and scaling multiple ventures across digital marketing, e-commerce, and health tech. Through Midnight Health and its recent merger with Honeysuckle Health, Nic is reshaping the way Australians access personalised, prescription-based healthcare, working with major brands and pharmacy partners to deliver direct-to-door solutions for modern consumers. Welcome, Nic.
Hey, thanks, David. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Great to have you on board. Thanks for joining. Very excited to see what we get through in today's discussion, but we will dive straight into it. As someone who has run a number of startups, most recently Midnight Health, working primarily alongside and inside a corporate, a lot of people would be interested, and I myself am interested, having, I guess, been somewhat part of that journey over periods of time, on what you believe the ingredients are that make a corporate and a startup work successfully together.
There's quite a few, and I will say that I think we've had a very successful journey in our engagement with NIB and a really good partnership there. I don't think that is true for most startup and corporate relationships, so we've certainly been lucky in that regard. I'd say there's a few areas. Firstly, I think the cultural alignment is really important. One of the things that we noticed very early on in our early discussions was that the culture in the NIB environment very much aligned with us and our culture. And I think that's important because as you go on this journey together, there's always going to be bumps in the road. Nothing ever goes perfectly and smoothly when it comes to these types of partnerships, just in the same way that it does with any type of investor or business partnership. So the reality is you need to be able to actually stand side by side, deal with those challenges together and have a good cultural alignment in terms of where you're trying to head. And that's across the organization. So it's not just cultural from a personal perspective, but things like risk appetite and, which is important in a corporate environment. You need to have a culture in your big brother or the corporate that's investing in you that actually supports your vision and ambition and ability to drive them into new innovative areas that maybe they haven't been in before. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing I would say that I think has been really important and driven success for us has been having the benefit and of the oversight in the areas where it's important from the corporate. So in our case, clinical governance, cybersecurity, but then also being given the autonomy to run our own race, build the business at our own pace, the freedom to kind of make decisions within the business and not be smothered, by the teams or in the bigger corporate that's kind of involved and invested in our business. And so that's certainly another factor that I think has really contributed to our success. And the third thing that I will say is that I still think that the startup itself should have independent growth strategy beyond the partner that's investing in them. We've driven a lot of our growth independently of NIB. They've certainly contributed to growth themselves. But equally, I think it's important that the actual business strategy doesn't just rely on the investor or partner to fuel all the growth. Because when you go into any type of partnership, and we've all been this, whether it's third party or as an investor, I think there's always these wild aspirational targets that you think you can deliver together, and you should shoot for the stars, certainly. But the reality is you always might fall short of some of those ambitions or some of the cross-sells or referrals that you thought you might have gotten from that partner. So the reality is the business still needs to be able to grow and to some level independently. And I see a lot of founders make that mistake where they do get a strategic corporate to come in as an investor, and then they start to pivot their whole entire strategy to just think, oh, this new investor now is going to basically fuel all the growth of my business for the next 5 years and I don't need anyone else. Because the reality is it might be quite contrasting to that.
Yeah, I think that possibly goes hand in glove with the second part you said around oversight, and perhaps is there sometimes, and again, I guess it comes to that cultural alignment, they all link together, is if you've got a strategic investor who obviously they've got their own motivation to invest in what you're bringing to the table. So finding that alignment and making sure that they're just not coming to you with expectations that they will control everything and you're just going to tick their box of whatever they're trying to do, but making sure that there is that level of partnership. It sounds like that's critically important as well.
Yeah, and the additional comment I'll make to that is being part of their long-term strategy as well. I think if you're not part of a longer term, or what you're building is not part of a longer-term vision for them, you also just become an experiment that they get rid of when their goals change, or a person moves on from a different role or something like that. So I think it's helpful that if you can be a part of their longer term vision, their longer term strategy for the business, then you'll also see them support you for the long term. And that's been important in our environment in particular.
Yeah, nice. Oh, very good. So if they're the what you've seen as the critical ingredients for success, why do so many get it wrong?
I think that there's quite often a challenge where the various stakeholders in the corporate environment do want to leave their mark or get their hands into the startup and not, leave them and give them that autonomy. I think you see that particularly when you might have somebody in a corporate environment who's driving a strategic investment, wants their name, with the tick beside it for, a successful investment or innovation within a business. And sometimes I think the corporate sponsor who's getting their hands dirty with the startup and the investment and driving that strategy might have different goals or in terms of how they want their engagement or hands to be within the startup. I think a lot of the startup founders are out there trying to build a big company where the goal of that corporate sponsor might be to try and get a promotion or do something else. And so you're not necessarily looking at what's best for the business. And the challenge that exists is that in a lot of cases, especially in an early stage startup, if you're the founder, you're not going to turn around the person who's driven a first round of investment into the business. Sometimes you can be very reluctant to turn around and tell them, hey, can you leave us alone so we can get work done and to keep focusing on our own vision that we think is right. And so that can create this tension or dynamic that puts you into an environment where the startup is not delivering or working on what they should be. They're working on the passion projects of the corporate sponsor, and ultimately you reach a position where the business does fail itself. And I think the other component that I'll add there is that I also think that a lot of startups do fail due to lack of independent strategy that goes beyond just the corporate as well. And I know I've already flagged that, but I think what happens is that if that revenue run rate is not growing at the rate that it needs to be for the corporate to think that it's a good investment, to believe that they should continue following on investing if it needs more money, or see it as a core part of their strategy, sometimes it's on the founder to make sure that the business is growing. They can't turn around and say, oh, it's your fault, it's not working. Because if they turn around and say that, then the corporate may as well stop investing in it anyway. So you really need to have your own strategy as a founder, and the corporate needs to support that as well.
You've just triggered something for me around corporates and around. You didn't say the word ego. I wrote down ego though. People often they might be trying to make an impression. That's common in corporate. Quite often looking for the next role or the next promotion or whatever it is, and sometimes that can drive decision making or influence decision making. Is there unique challenges when you are working as a partner who is, I guess, where the partner has skin in the game, and sometimes the people involved and the decision makers are changing because they are getting the next job, and then you've got someone else coming in, and that can shift and sort of drive new tensions and new challenges? Is that I don't know if that's healthy or unhealthy, but is that even a unique challenge that does exist?
Yeah, it certainly is like that. So for us, that was one of the concerns we always had, was that, let's say there's a change in leadership in NIB, for example, and the people who really back what we're doing are no longer in charge of making decisions. Someone goes off, gets a promotion, or goes to another business. That's a real concern for us, because you might find yourself one day where you have all the support in the world, and then a role changes, and from Friday to Monday, the ambition to invest in your business or follow this longer term innovative ambition no longer exists. And so that was always a real fear or concern for us. And that's why one of the earlier remarks I made around culture of the business and cultural alignment is important, because there was a cultural alignment across the whole NIB organization, really, in terms of what their aspirations were, where we fit into that with our digital healthcare business. And so for us, we found some level of comfort. And throughout the process of the business having invested in us, they've obviously had a CEO change. Fortunately, the new CEO actually led the first investment into us in his previous role. So that was good for us. But yeah, there's certainly a concern that along the last, let's say 3.5 years, almost 4 years, that we've been on this journey with NIB as an investor. And there's always a risk that was going to happen, or something would have changed in the market dynamics that might have led them to shy away from it. And the digital health space as well. The bigger risk for us was not only people changing, but I made the point earlier around risk appetite and culture. I mean, the digital healthcare space has had its own challenges over the last few years since we've been involved in it. It's been a very dynamic space. There's been a lot of regulatory eyes on digital healthcare and telehealth, and so it really tested NIB's appetite and ambition and innovative mindset towards what's their risk appetite to actually try and bring these innovative models of care to Australia. And so that was tested, and the reality is, they've continued to back us, but there's also moments like that could derail a corporate startup relationship for sure.
Yeah, of course. I guess somewhat linked to culture, it's I would say widely regarded by most people who work in corporate, in startup or anywhere else, that startups are, I guess, unencumbered by a lot of things that corporates might be around oversight, governance, brand, legacy, assets protection. There's lots of stuff that they I guess that means their risk appetite is just different to many startups or early stage businesses. How do you manage that? You're working somewhat inside or beside as a 1, 2, 3, 4-year-old business inside a 75-odd-year-old business or plus, I think. How do you manage that tension to move at the speed that you can and that you should or probably need to hit your growth goals and your ambitions and making an impact in an environment that is not necessarily operating in the same cadence, I guess?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there, and one of them I would put back to why the relationship has been successful as well. But firstly, I think remaining independent is a benefit in that regard. I think, while you're still operating as an independent entity, independent startup that the larger 75-year-old corporate has invested into, I think that helps as well, because there's some level of separation between the two businesses, particularly in the early stages as you're growing and maturing as a business. And the other thing that I think is important for the corporate to realize as well is that there's levels of maturity that the business will go through as it grows and scales. So you can't expect a business with 8 people in it and $100,000 a month revenue to go through a huge investment into cybersecurity at a level that you might expect from the Commonwealth Bank. And the same goes for other areas of governance and risk. But you have to develop a roadmap together for how you mature that over time. And so you can imagine our cybersecurity posture or our clinical governance framework or other aspects of our business now are very different and have matured significantly since 4 years ago. And so it's finding the right size in terms of investment and capabilities that you need to stand up along this journey, because you could also equally cripple the startup by having them spend all of this time on policies and procedures and governance frameworks that mean you can't actually go and do what a startup does best, and that's develop products and iterate on that and grow at scale and make fast decisions. And so things slow down over time. Like, we're very different now in terms of how we operate at 70 staff compared to when we had 5. But that's to be expected, and that's important. And so I think you need to understand what are the key things you need to invest time and energy into to reduce risk, but then build a roadmap for how you mature and improve that over time until inevitably one day you become a part of the big corporate organization like we are now. And then we're now, again, go as a result of that, go through a further uplift in terms of posture and realignment of risk frameworks and the like. And so I think you need to kind of go on that journey together. And the reality is that is going to be a 3, 4, 5, 6-year journey in most cases to get up to the level that you might expect someone once they're become part of the bigger corporate organization.
And I guess it's equally important for the corporate to recognize those same, I guess it comes back to that cultural alignment and values, right? Is understanding that this is not going to give you overnight success. It has to be a partnership. We have to work together. We have to build together. But you also need to give us the level of independence that we need to succeed, whilst leveraging your competitive advantage and things like you mentioned around risk governance and clinical governance and those kind of things. It sounds like that's the perfect kind of relationship where you've got a competitive advantage through your partnership or your investment to do some of the stuff where you don't have the expertise, but you bring in the expertise of the ability to move product, ship product, test things, break things, whatever it might be, but in a safe and sort of low risk environment, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely correct. And I think part of that also comes with trust as well. Like as you start working together, the big corporate needs to get to a point where they trust the startup founders or the startup leadership team to make good decisions around that, show that the startup is actually making incremental improvements on an ongoing basis in these areas of risk that are of concern and should be of concern to the startup, but also probably more concern to the corporate when they've got their bigger, more established business with more to lose. So I think that also you establish and build that trust over time that helps you to kind of make those decisions in those areas as well. But then equally, it's been a really good benefit for us to be able to lean on the team and capabilities that someone like NIB has had because they've obviously got far more resources, great cybersecurity teams, great clinical teams. So we've had the luxury of being able to lean on them, ask them to help us develop a roadmap, do an audit for us. We've had access to resources that we wouldn't have had as an independent startup. So you need to be able to collaborate in those areas where it makes sense, and the startup can benefit from that for sure.
Yeah, nice one. Speaking of, I guess let's talk a little bit about the business, about Midnight Health and Honeysuckle Health, and particularly interested in some of the I guess consumer health trends you sort of touched on earlier, that health tech in itself has had a lot of change since you've begun, and increased scrutiny and challenges and all these kind of things. What consumer health trends have you been keeping, I guess, a close eye on, and what are the things that excite you around the future of health?
Well, I mean, I think firstly, like the adoption of digital technology to drive healthcare, either access, decision making, is continuing to grow at such a rapid rate that I think data-driven healthcare is where we end up, where non-traditional models of care, which is what we're focused on as a business, and that might extend beyond digital healthcare like we're providing, but maybe at-home care, basically delivering care in other settings, I think provides a really interesting opportunity longer term for how we capture data, use data to actually drive better customer experiences. And I say customer instead of patient because I think we should treat patients like customers. I think if you treat them like patients, you don't care if they sit in the waiting room for 2 hours. If you treat them like a customer, you focus on giving them a better experience than what we might typically receive in the healthcare system. So if we can use data to drive more personalization, start to move into preventative healthcare, which I think is really exciting, to track and deliver experiences that exist in between traditional consultations. So one of the things that I think digital or even telephonic models of care can deliver far better than some of the physical care experiences we would normally get is what happens in between those consults. The check-ins, the ability for people to track progress, the ability for people to manage medication deliveries, look at whether the data that they've provided through a previous consultation actually demonstrates that they might be at risk of a chronic disease, for example, and prompt them to go and get a pathology test for diabetes, for example. There's heaps of really exciting things that we can do, but I think digital care creates access to data that can then be used to deliver these personalized and preventative health experiences in a way that we haven't been able to do in the past. Because if I think about preventative health, there's years and years of data and research that says if you look like this, you've got this percentage chance of this chronic disease. So the challenge has not been that we don't know that these risk factors lead to this chronic disease. The challenge is actually getting the data on the risk factors on every individual. But digital models of care enable us to capture way more data in a structured way that actually enable us to start using it. So that's what I think is really exciting. We're seeing these trends around longevity, particularly in other markets. I think some of the approaches, may not prove to be successful and adopted by many, but I think that the train of thought is better, and I think it all leads to people accessing healthcare easier and living longer, happier, and healthier lives.
So, and I think that aligns nicely with if we think about the Australian healthcare system, and I often talk about there's three people who pay for healthcare, or three payers of healthcare in Australia. There's governments, and I'll just lump all levels of government together. There's insurers and there's individuals. In Australia, compared to a lot of global markets, insurers have they pay a higher proportion of healthcare than many other markets in OECD and beyond. And I think that links beautifully to what you were just saying around this kind of happier, healthy members. If you look at the purpose of most health insurers in Australia, it's some variation of pretty much that, is this kind of shift to preventative. And I'm a bit of an insurance nerd, so I often talk about, I haven't found a better industry where consumer and commercial motivations are more aligned than insurance, because neither of them, and health is a great example of that, because neither the customer, as I'll say, the customer, not the patient, neither the customer nor the organisation wants ill health, right? Because that's just, it's not great for the customer, and it's not great for the consumer, and all the other people who are paying into the health fund either. So I guess when you were seeking investment, and we're going a little bit off piece here, but when you were seeking investment for Midnight, when you were kind of getting started and you knew you wanted to raise some capital and bring some strategic investment in, what led you towards insurance?
Well, the interesting thing is that insurance came to us.
Is that right?
So we didn't. So when we set out to raise capital, I pitched many different people, and one of the goals for us was to find a good strategic investor. So we kind of set out and said, look, we don't necessarily want an investor that can just bring money to the table. We do want an investor that's strategic, that can deliver value beyond just money, that can also help support growth, that were part of their strategic vision. And so as I was going through a few months worth of roadshow of pitching everybody, we ended up on the desk of one of the executives at NIB, who kind of sent me an email out of the blue. And until I received that email, I hadn't actually thought of a health insurer as an investor in our business. And once we received that kind of first email and jumped on the first call, that's when I actually realized that the insurance market was going through this transition and across not just NIB, but other health insurance funds were all kind of going through this process of bringing more healthcare services to their members instead of just paying bills at the end, actually trying to actively play a role in being a healthcare provider to some extent to their members. And so, and particularly with models like telehealth or digital healthcare, where it was kind of easily accessible to a nationwide customer base. And so that's where, again, we didn't go out seeking. Fortunately, that came through to us for the first conversation, but it was very interesting and opened my eyes to what the insurance market was doing. And then as soon as we had that first conversation, honestly, after having pitched another 70 plus people prior to that, it was very obvious that this was a really good match, and we were part of a long-term vision, and not just for NIB as a standalone business, but actually the whole sector of health insurance. So that really made it very attractive for us in terms of looking like the right partnership to jump on board with.
Yeah, nice one. So again, on Midnight, if I think about, you've built a business that does bypass traditional models of healthcare delivery. You've got digitization. You said that preventative health data. There's all kind of elements there. And maybe it doesn't come down to one thing, but what's broken about the current system that you're trying to fix, or you believe that you have a responsibility to try and improve?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'll say is that I think digital healthcare is really established to complement or supplement the existing healthcare system. You can never receive all of your healthcare digitally. There's certainly a need to view clinicians in person where appropriate, but digital healthcare can certainly play a role in helping to support the existing healthcare system. I think that there's a few things that I would say where I think we can do a better job of. And I mean, the first one comes down to the actual increasing cost of care. So we can't access bulk billing for anything that we do, yet we can provide competitive rates on a private basis for individuals to come and do a telehealth consult with our clinicians. In some cases, quite a bit cheaper than what the gap fees might be from certain clinics. There's some with a pretty large gap at the moment, and that's increasing every year. So the first comment I'd make is that, without the support of Medicare, we can still provide healthcare cheaper than some of the GP clinics at the moment. And so that's kind of the first problem I think that exists in the system. For clinicians operating in a digital environment, it does allow them to operate more efficiently without, some of the overheads and costs that they have as well in a physical clinic. And so there's certainly an opportunity for digital health care to provide more cost-effective care to people across Australia. The second thing is access as well. So the other great thing about digital care, there are some areas around Australia where a country that's quite dispersed. We've got a lot of people that live in regional areas. Some of them take weeks or months to be able to get into see a doctor or see a clinician. And so for us to be able to connect somebody who's in the rural area of Queensland with a clinician who's based in New South Wales or Victoria, who because there's nobody locally that can actually see them, when they have an immediate need, the ability to break down those barriers and provide access to a doctor within 15 minutes is actually pretty amazing, and a way to really overcome some of the challenges we have with resource from a clinical perspective, which are only projected to get worse over the next 10 to 20 years. So I think embracing digital technology to deliver care as one model of care, again, not to replace existing care, but I think we can certainly break down some of those barriers that are leading to people who may get sicker or may end up with a chronic disease that could have been avoided if they had been able to get access to care more quickly.
Yeah, nice one. Look, as someone, I would almost extend, I won't go too deep on personal stories, but I was nodding away there, thinking when you said the word access I had a great example, and you and I, before we hit recording, we were talking about New Zealand. 12 months ago or so, I broke my wrist in New Zealand, and I got patched up over there, and then I had to come back here, and I was booked in with a surgeon, but I needed a referral, and telehealth actually bridged that gap really well. It was almost like the night before, because I needed surgery like the next day. There was no way I could get into a GP to give me the referral I needed to get the surgery the next day, and I actually used midnight to get a doctor within 15 minutes on the phone, did an assessment, talked me through it, gave them a referral I needed, and I was on my way. And I think it did cost about the same or less than probably would have cost if I was even able to get access to my regular GP or service. So I think it's a great example of that complementary, not replacement, but just like it leans on access. I had the call at 9 o'clock at night. I needed it now. It was immediacy. There was all these kind of things, and it was just like, wow. That was when I was personally convinced that this is a great complementer to the system that solves problems that it was possibly never initially designed to solve. Yeah. But it can do those things. So I just say I extend access is, you've got regional and geographic access, but I think there's other elements of access that it can actually solve for as well.
Yeah, and when we quite often talk about improving access to care, and that's fundamental to the thesis of this business and the vision and mission that we're on. And access I like as a word to explain how digital health can improve access to care, because access, to your point, can mean many things. It can mean via phone. It can mean late at night. It can mean if you've got 15 minutes available while you're at work between meetings and you can't actually take 4 hours off to go and sit at the doctor. So there's many different ways, many different things that access can mean when it comes to getting the healthcare that you need. And so digital health, I think, can more than close the gap in some of those areas, which is going to only benefit our healthcare system, more importantly, benefit the healthcare of the Australian population.
Yeah, that's great. Look, and without going too deep into your business, I'm genuinely curious, what's the value proposition for the supply side for your clinicians to access a telehealth or use a telehealth service?
Well, it's quite interesting because we've found like very good response rates when we go out to market looking for clinicians to come and join the platform. So most of them work, might work a few days in a physical clinic, a couple of days doing telehealth with us. Most of our staff are not full-time employed. They actually like to do a bit of both and have some variety in their weeks. And the reality is for many of these clinicians, when they were studying, they never thought it would be possible that they could actually practice in the comfort of their own home, or
of course,
practice an environment that wasn't sitting in a physical clinic for 12 hours a day and getting burnt out. And that is a real problem that's impacting many of the clinicians today, as well as they're getting burnt out because they're having to spend so many hours sitting in clinics. They're overrun, the demand is too high. So being able to complement physical clinic work with working telehealth, either after hours, a couple of days a week. Some of our clinicians are mothers, for example, who actually work shifts during the day in between school. So there's lots of ways that you can have a flexibility by working for a digital healthcare provider that you can't in a physical clinic. And so that actually means that we're probably telehealth or digital healthcare is probably bringing more of the workforce back online because they didn't have a similar alternative in the past, which is actually great when it comes down to, how do we solve these resource shortages or problems in the ecosystem. So most of our clinicians love working in this environment. Found it very different to environments that they worked at before. We have some clinicians who come and join us in the office sometimes, and as you can imagine, it's a bit different than a GP clinic. And so, it's great. I think that it gives a good variety and keeps people, saves them, I think, from burning out, as they might if they could only work in one type of setting on an ongoing basis.
Nice one. Yeah, that is fascinating. I hadn't really thought necessarily, but as soon as you said that, I pictured a GP sitting on a camping chair in Broome in front of their caravan, doing it. I'm sure it's far more clinical but like, you're right. Like there's probably a lot of industries where you would never, when you study, you would never consider an alternative model of what you think you're walking into. But then when that opens up to you, that becomes really, really compelling and really attractive. And I'm sure there's trade-offs that they're making as a result of that. But that makes it a really interesting proposition.
Yeah, the like rapid adoption of technology across all sectors has changed the way that all of us can work, and many of us are able to work in ways, like your example, that we never would have thought possible. And I think even for clinicians, now you're seeing the adoption of like AI transcribers, for example, reducing workload for a clinician, meaning they don't have to sit there and type notes. There's lots of other aspects of digital technology that are actually really improving the role of a clinician and probably allowing them to spend more time on the things that they want to, because they're removing some of the admin burden. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the next 5, 10, 15 years looks like as well for the role of a clinician and how technology supports them.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. Again, I told you that sometimes I can't shut up, but I was in a GP clinic with my wife the other day, and we're doing a follow-up with a GP, and we just went sort of used HotDoc to go to first available sort of thing, and they were using one of the AI recording tools, and they had to leave the room to go and get something. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, and my wife looked at me. She goes, she started talking about the GP. She's like, "Oh, he's really good, and I feel really comfortable, all these things." And I was like, like this is going to come up on the transcription and the summary. It's like, anyway, sorry.
You're a technology-minded person, so you're aware of that, right? But how many other people are sitting in not noticing that the AI scribe is on and making comments or hopefully none of them are too negative that they get
that's right. Yeah. Exactly. Anyway, we might switch a little bit and sort of roll back a little bit into insurance, because I know a lot of insurers are active sort of viewers and listeners to the podcast. This is something that is hotly contested. Feels like it's particularly, I'd say, hot at the moment with what we're seeing in the challenges in private hospital sector in particular at the moment in Australia. Is what role do you think that insurers can play in the future of healthcare, particularly in Australia?
It's an interesting question. I do think that we're already starting to see that shift from, NIB had a strategy that they developed called payer to partner, which and the whole idea behind that was moving from paying bills to becoming a healthcare partner for their members. And so I think we are continuing to see that trend across all of the big health insurers. You've got Bupa has obviously invested in Bluer as their digital health offering, which is supporting their individual members as well as the corporate health members. Obviously, NIB has invested in us to do something similar. Medibank, obviously playing a bigger role as well with likes of Amplar and their approach. So I think we're just going to continually see this trend to move where insurers will move from just being the payer of fees into actually delivering and providing healthcare services to their members. And I think that becomes the differentiator in market for them. Mark Fitzgibbon, former CEO of NIB, I've seen speak regularly about wanting, his view was that insurers should be able to fund primary care for members like the same way that they do in the US markets. And whether or not that's allowed to happen, the reality is we're seeing so much pressure on the Australian healthcare system and on Medicare that something potentially needs to change. Whether that's the answer, I'm not sure, but I do think that we'll continually see this role of insurers paying and providing more services to members. And then for the Australian population, it means that the value we get from health insurance will progressively become more if that does become the case. Right now, we primarily use it for dental visits and glasses, and if we need a surgery, mostly because we've met the threshold from a salary perspective, so we go and sign up for health insurance. We're starting to see these real tangible benefits, and that continues to expand. And I think everybody's happy and everybody wins in that regard.
Yeah, look, I do agree, and maybe I'm skewed because I come from an insurance background. I entered insurance a decade ago and I haven't found a way out yet. But maybe it's because again I don't think there's an industry that has a greater alignment of desired outcomes. But if you think about the core principles of insurance, or the kind of the foundations of insurance being a group of people pooling money to protect each other, so that if something goes wrong, knowing that individually they can probably can't afford the huge financial burden that comes with a bad event, right? And I think if you think about the insurance and the control that they lack over how their money is actually spent, that then theoretically members and consumers should win if the insurer has greater control over how their money is directed. Theoretically, this is the argument I have when sort of helps me get to sleep every night. But I think that's a hard argument to counter. I can understand that there are stakeholders that have concerns around insurers playing, sort of almost third line forcing how people are cared for and monopolizing care and things like that. But again, I don't think that is the intent for most insurers. I actually think they're genuine. Having worked in insurance for a long time, there's brilliant people in the industry who genuinely care about their customers and their members and actually making an impact and their purpose and all these kind of things. So, sorry, I guess this is a long way to say I agree with what you were saying.
Yeah. And I think it's such a heavily regulated industry that the reality is there's such a restricted framework in which you can make those decisions and deliver that care and innovate within a very regulated environment. So I think for as long as there are those controls in place, there's always going to be some level of restriction, whether it does drive a better outcome for members and maybe a lower cost or better healthcare outcomes for members. There's still so many things, so many guardrails that keep all of the insurers, and really be able to do so much, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess you sort of touched on this before around, you sort of said personalized and preventative care. Personalized care is often spoken about, I would say largely misunderstood, largely, I would say, sort of en masse, not necessarily implemented particularly well at scale. I think there is an intent, there's an ambition, but I would love to hear your thoughts on what you believe the future of healthcare looks like.
Yeah, well, I think my view is that I think it is really data driven to begin with. Like back to some points that I was making earlier. I think you can't truly deliver personalized healthcare unless it comes from capturing and leveraging the data around a specific individual.
Yep.
And I certainly mean at scale as well. I think you could probably find pockets of personalized care that exist in a local clinic, or particularly a specialized clinic, maybe around weight loss or men's health or whatever it might be. I'm sure you find pockets, we would find pockets of those that exist around the country. But if we're talking about trying to truly make a big fundamental shift in the way that healthcare is delivered and move into these trends of personalized care, it's how do we capture structured data around individuals and use that to drive recommendations, drive change, personalize over time based on what we're seeing. And that is not just those tools in the hands of practitioners on a digital platform like ours, but it's those same tools in the hands of people in a physical clinic or in a hospital or wherever they might be getting care. So, I think firstly, like getting interoperability solved is one step towards that. I think the fact that, I've heard we're part of the FIRE working group, the Australian Digital Health Agency, and somebody who's leading that group gave the example of them going to the hospital with their daughter, and they can't pass the information from her emergency visit into the regular bed in hospital, and so they have to start all over again, and it's like literally just down the corridor. So those things exist within our system here. So I think firstly, you get interoperability solved. I think some of the challenges that people have with digital healthcare is talking about the fragmentation of care and health records. And, if you actually get interoperability solved properly, that is eliminated completely. And so then I can get David's data about, where your last few GP visits or your last telehealth visit, and then pull them all together to actually go, here's David, here's all the information I know about him. And then summarize that, using technology to go, cool, well, here's David's health profile. Here's what we know about him. David actually looks like he could be coming up to have this disease or that disease, or David should get this pathology test. We could do all of that if we actually had access to that structured data. And so I think that is then how we drive scalable, efficient, personalized healthcare. And the other gap that I think that will come off the back of that is how we use technology to really fill this gap in between consults. I'm a really big believer that where we struggle a little bit in the physical care environment is that when you have a consultation with your doctor, in most cases, you don't hear from them again or see them again until you book a follow-up appointment.
Yep.
I think there's a really great opportunity. If somebody needs to be fed information after they get put onto a treatment plan, or they need a check-in around medication or whatever it might be, you can scale that through technology to actually ensure that somebody is taking their medication when they should be, that they have access to information when they need it. There's a really big gap to fill in between consultations that technology can do a great job of and can personalize at scale as well. So I think those two things combined actually lead to a way better experience for us as customers or patients, but then also for clinicians as well. And then again, drive better health outcomes if they lead to better adherence. They lead to people having follow-ups when they need it. You're starting to actually provide personalized care and identify or diagnose diseases that maybe you would have missed in the past. So I think all of those things ultimately are underpinned by data and technology as the starting point.
And interoperability is an interesting topic. I'm curious, who do you think should be playing that role? We've got this unique sort of public and private healthcare system in Australia. So is it government should be sort of driving this? Is it private sector? How do you kind of make those things work together in an efficient manner?
My observation, hopefully I don't upset anybody when I say this, my observation is that the government actually wants to drive interoperability forward, right? Like they're leading the
Butler has made that. He said that recently publicly.
Drive it forward. To me, it feels like some pockets of the private sector are the ones who are trying not to open up their patient data to everyone else. And so I actually think there's this a little bit of a conflict that exists. Now, I don't think many of them publicly say this, but I think maybe some of the actions suggest that it's not in their best interests to open up their patient data to everybody, so that someone's platform like ours could actually just extract and pull your data in when you come in for a consult for the first time. And there's many reasons I understand why somebody might not want to expose that information, but the reality is I think the government is doing a good job of trying to push that forward, drive that initiative forward. And the reality is I think to actually kind of force adoption of it across the board, they probably are the ones who need to lead and mandate that, and then make the private sector follow suit, because I think there's some areas of the private sector that benefit from not having interoperability as a mandate. I interestingly spoke to somebody from the US maybe 18 months ago or 2 years ago now. They were saying that when they mandated fire in the US, it was almost like some people evolved with their PhD in how to avoid interoperability and finding reasons that they couldn't possibly integrate with the system. So I think that'll be interesting to see whether we have much of that here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's interesting. All right. Well, I might. We've touched on Midnight. We've touched on Honeysuckle. I might actually hand over to you to just maybe just tell a little bit of the story around Midnight and your sort of, I guess at a 30,000 foot view, talk about the merger with Honeysuckle Health, and what that means for the future and what the benefits of coming together are, and the strategic rationale. Would love to hear a little bit about that and what that means for consumers in the future.
Yeah, certainly. Well, the very quick view of Midnight Health, for those who don't know, is, we founded in 2021 with a brand called Yulee, which is focused on women's healthcare. Part of that was we launched Australia's first emergency contraception delivery service, which got a lot of press and kind of gave a great kickstart to the business. But we had a much bigger ambition in terms of trying to develop a whole healthcare ecosystem, from a digitally led platform. And so we launched another brand, which is kind of the biggest brand that we have in the market now, which is Hub.Health. So we have those two consumer-facing brands, which ultimately have serviced more than 230,000 customers since 2021, done over 400,000 consults. I think we've just cracked 300,000 medication deliveries. So we're really providing access to telehealth consultations and pharmacy delivery across a range of conditions, general telehealth, any sort of healthcare needs that we can provide in a digital environment. As you mentioned earlier this year, after multiple rounds of investment from NIB, we have merged with Honeysuckle Health. So Honeysuckle Health were another joint venture that NIB had in the health services space. And bringing the two businesses together it actually creates a really exciting opportunity for us to really look forward into how we build a bigger healthcare services business that can provide services to multiple segments of the market. I think we naturally reached a point where telehealth, digital healthcare, pharmacy services that we provide are becoming something that are very desired within the Honeysuckle Health client base. So, Honeysuckle Health traditionally has provided health management programs to private health insurance customers, to general insurers, to public health as well. And so we're starting to find this convergence of their health management programs and health services combining with our digital health platforms as we're starting to enter different segments. So as we go to market now, the exciting thing is that we've got essentially a consumer health division, which includes Hub.Health and Yulee and Healthy Weight for Life to some extent, which is another brand that Honeysuckle Health have. We have these insurer health solutions for private health insurers and general insurers across things like injury support program, the other health management programs. And then we got the public, focus on public health, where we can provide all these same services into those segments. And then finally, corporate health, which is a newer area for us. And that started off the back of the Hub.Health services around telehealth and pharmacy. I think we'll see a trend in the Australian market where corporates start to play a role in actually funding access to more healthcare services than what they have traditionally, as we find this gap in the cost of care continues to increase, and maybe some of their employees are not accessing care in the way that they should, and ultimately that starts to impact their health and their performance at work. So we see that already exists in the American market through the health insurance model. I think we'll start to find, we already are starting to see an appetite from employers who actually want to start to fund access to healthcare services. So we're excited about what the corporate health department looks like as well. We start to see that's what the what Honeysuckle Health starts to look like now, and takes a very different shape. And we're a few months into the integration of the two businesses. So as you can understand, there's still a lot of work to be done, but we're definitely we've come together really well in terms of culture. We're now over 200 staff, as a combined entity, and so really excited about what that looks like over the next 3, 5, 6 years for the group as we become and establish ourselves as more of a larger healthcare services business servicing these different segments.
Sounds like a really exciting proposition for various components, various parts of the market, which is really cool. I hadn't necessarily thought about general insurance, but obviously you've got things like CTP, workers' comp, those kind of injury claims, where they are probably more health insurance type products than they are traditional, home and motor type products. So there's also all sorts of opportunities there. So we might wrap it up, and I guess with the final question is for anyone who's listening or watching and is interested in getting in touch either with yourself just for a conversation or more widely about Honeysuckle Health and Midnight, what's the easiest way to do so?
Finding me on LinkedIn is probably the easiest way.
Yep.
You just search my name, you'll be able to find me on LinkedIn.
Yep.
You can also send me an email on n.blair@honeysucklehealth.com.au. So always open to cold emails or up for random chats or coffees or video calls with people. I always like to speak to people around the industry and see what people are doing. So feel free to find me on LinkedIn, send me an email, or you can always jump on the honeysucklehealth.com.au website.
Nice one. I love how you mentioned you're always open to cold emails. Back to your story around that's kind of exactly how you ended up where you are today with.
That's right.
With NIB. So I think that's almost like there's proof there that you'll probably respond if you do get something to your inbox. Look, Nic, thank you so much for joining. There's so much here invaluable for myself, but hopefully for anyone who's engaging with this, particularly leaders in the insurance space. I think they'll be particularly interested in not only what's happening in digital health and the future of healthcare, but also what it's like to work with a startup, because I'm sure you mentioned a couple of NIB's competitors have invested in startups, in similar startups in the space. I'm sure there are others who are partnering or thinking to partner or looking to make leaps and bounds into this space. We've seen active investment even as recently as the last sort of week or so from some of the smaller funds, the likes of Australian Unity, GMHBA, etc., into some of these areas. So I'm sure there's lots of value that can be taken for anyone engaging. So a huge thanks for your time, and we look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, thanks heaps for having me.